You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 381 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer. I will be your host, and I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin. He comes to us high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy. Thanks.
It's been a hot week in Chicago when it comes to the temperature. The Cubs have been out of town. They performed exactly as we predicted on last week's podcast. We'll get into all the details of the week to help us break down the week that was. Look ahead to all the news in the week that will be. Longtime friend of the show. You know him from all of his writings on the internet, Baseball Prospectus, Northside Baseball, and of course his many appearances here on this podcast. Matt Trueblood, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
No problem, although it sounds like you guys just needed to predict them to play better, and they would have. So should we all just feel a little upset with you guys? Or
a little bit. We do deserve a little bit of the blame. It's hard knowing what's going to happen every single time.
5 consecutive weeks. No.
It's a heavy burden.
And when we look at the good news is when we start this week, no matter how last week went, the Cubs are still in first place as of the time of this recording with 49 victories, 35 losses atop the NL Central. Although only 2 games in front of the Milwaukee Brewers, 2.5 in front of the St. Louis Cardinals. I don't care for the Brewers playing the Rockies. That just seems unfair this week. We've got a lot to get to. Let's start with the big series of the week. The Cubs and Cardinals played for the first time this season. And the Cubs went into St. Louis. We predicted a split. I think we were looking at Imanaga's return being a positive in a game they should win. We were going to chalk up a game to weirdness. They would always just lose one of those. And then a 50-50 shot in the other. So, Pat, we'll start with you. Ben Brown, another, I'd say, concerning outing from him.
Yeah, we've discussed the last couple weeks the potential opportunity the Cubs had to place him in the bullpen and maybe put somebody else in the rotation, especially when Imanaga got back. It looks like they're going to send him to AAA for a little while instead because they've got some roster issues they have to deal with. He has options. Some people don't, which makes sense. Let him, go down and regroup, I guess, a little bit. I think, if anything, that game and the series as a whole asks or beckons the age-old question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it still make a sound? And that's how Busch Stadium felt for me this week. It was a very empty, sparsely populated facility, and yet the Cubs could not take advantage of the lack of home field advantage that they had there, especially in that first game. And I think one of the trends, and we'll talk about it as this week as we did last week, I guess, is that the Cubs are having this annoying habit of having games where their starting pitcher gets completely blown up, and they lose those games, and they pretty much win all the others. So if they can just somehow prevent the 7 or 8 run, outings from their starting pitchers, I think they'll be in pretty good shape. But right now they're not able to do that, which is why they're losing for the most part half the time.
Yeah, Matt, Ben Brown, 17 home runs given up in his last 5 games. When he comes back, does he have to still be in the rotation? Do you think he's a bullpen guy? What do you do the opener and have him piggybacking with other people? What's your take on how the Cubs handle Brown going forward?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, if he doesn't do something to change his whole, what he is, his arsenal, then he shouldn't be starting games. I've been saying this since last year, really, and at times it's worked. There will be days when he shows up and he has command of both the fastball and the curve, and the sequencing's right. And frankly, he's just running into the right offense that day. Sometimes it'll be the Reds, or last year it was the Brewers when they were in a funk. And you catch a bad team at the right time and he can look dazzling because it's a hard fastball and it's a pretty sick curve. And it's nothing else, because I can't figure out whether they've tried everything and he's just incapable of throwing a third pitch, or whether they haven't tried nearly enough things, but something's wrong. Yeah, he should not only be throwing these 2 pitches, because they're not good enough to be a 2-pitch starting pitcher. That creature exists. It doesn't look like this.
I don't know where you've been, Matt, but he threw a changeup 4 starts ago.
Yeah. He's thrown a handful of them. Next time he throws one that matters, let me know. It's just the fastball's too straight, and the curve has to play off the fastball. It's not the kind of pitch he can. He's not one of those guys who can throw the curveball 55% of the time and the fastball 45%. Or if he is, they also haven't tried that. So there's either a lack of experimentation that needed to happen, or they've run those experiments outside of game action and stuff, and he's shown them that he's incapable of checking those boxes. Either way, he needs to not start a game probably again for the 2025 Cubs. If he comes back up, and I'm saying if he comes back up to the Cubs this year, it should be as a reliever, where the fastball can gain 2 ticks, where he can sit 98 instead of occasionally touching 98. That's what has to happen for that fastball to work. That fastball is getting rocked, and it's not a coincidence, and it's not bad luck. It's just not that good a pitch. So he's got to fix that, and the way to fix that is less exposure and higher intensity. Or I think there's a decent chance, certainly they're going to hope that they stay pretty much healthy from here, and that they make a starting pitcher addition in the next month. And that would pretty much close out the rotation for Ben Brown for the rest of the year. And in fact, Brown might be a chip in a trade before July is out. So if he starts a game for the Cubs again this year, I think something has gone wrong, or something's gone really, really right down in Iowa. But I'm not expecting that at this point. I think we should have seen that thing go right by now if it was going to, with the Cubs coaches working with it.
Jeremy, as a point of order, I'd like to table and circle back to Matt's comment about the rotation and whether or not it is closed out and there's no room for him, because I have some concerns that I want to have Matt help us alleviate in a few minutes when we get to that part of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know which part that's going to be. The next game in St. Louis, after the Cubs dropped that opener 8-2, the Tuesday game was Jameson Taillon pitching against McGreevy for the Cardinals, and Taillon,
the league leader in home runs, Jameson Taillon.
Yeah,
he gave up a 2-run home run to Nootbaar. That was back-to-back games where Nootbaar hit a 2-run home run against the Cubs. So the Cubs did have a lead in this game for a while. Suzuki stayed hot, hit the 3-run home run, but just that bottom of the 4th, the wheels fell off for Taillon. Cardinals took the lead 7-5, and that inning just kept getting worse when we got to the bottom of the 4th with 1 out, when Burleson hits the deep fly ball with a man on second. PCA makes the catch, forgets how many outs there are, and Mason Wynn's able to tag up and score basically a sac fly from second base, which is just yikes. 8-5 there, and that hurts when the Cubs the Cubs end up dropping that game when the lead got cut down to 8-7, right? Like that ends up being pretty costly. But Cubs almost able to survive a rough outing from Taillon, but are unable to get an extra run across in the 9th, leaving runners at second and third. Dansby Swanson unable to do it as Arenado makes a pretty impressive play. The chopper barehanded throws out Dansby to end the game. Matt, we'll start with you. Is this it's good that the offense can hang around, but it's really disappointing when they can't pull out a close game like this one.
Yeah. I mean, I think the offense is sometimes making this team, they're making these games look like they could or should be wins when really, like you said, Pat, when the starter gets their doors blown off that way, you're supposed to lose that game. What you're going for is not having the starter have that happen as often. That's really the thing that's got to change here. I think the offense has also been pretty uneven lately, and there are ways you hope that can be smoothed out over time. But right now they're in a little bit of a funk, of an up and down period, because you have to have those during the year. The pitching staff's got to pick them up, and it's been the opposite on some nights.
I can promise you this, Jeremy, that when PCA had that very uncharacteristic mental mistake, I guarantee you that there were dozens, if not hundreds, of Cubs fans, probably mostly over the age of 70, saying something to the effect of, well, that's what happens when you're a hot dog out there and you catch the ball that way. Put two hands on the ball and catch it up in the air and look around. That way you'll know what's going on, as opposed to, the way he kind of catches the ball almost like he's catching it in his pocket or something, So an unfortunate timing for that play, as it turns out. But yeah, to both your points, look, Cubs have a lot of streaky hitters, and right now some of them, Tucker and Suzuki, are doing great. Others are not. And it was a game that, certainly would have been a great game to come back and win. I think that's for sure. And early in the season, they did come back and win some of those games, but they're having more trouble doing it now. It's a lot to ask, as Matt pointed out. So, the worst part was just starting off the road trip 0-2. That could have spelled a disaster, especially as hot as some of the other teams in the division are playing. Luckily, the Cubs are not. The Cubs have resilience, right?
Well, and they had their two best pitchers going in the next two games,
that
Matthew
helps.
Boyd and Shota Imanaga. Keeping with the theme of good starting pitching sure does help you win. Boyd, he threw 79 pitches through 6 shutout innings. His 1,000th career inning in that game as well. Cubs,
a third of them he's thrown this
8-0.
year, so it feels like
Yeah, Cubs win 8-0. A lot of seven runs there. Tucker hits a home run. Really good game all around, and a great way to rebound after those first, especially coming off a tough loss the night before. And then Thursday, rolling into Shota's return, his first start since May 4th. It's been that long. We've been without Shota in the rotation. It was great to see him come back.
Could not have asked for a better start coming off the IL like that. Thank God.
Yeah, retired 10 in a row at one point, 5 shutout innings. Only 1 hit, no runs, 3 strikeouts to 1 walk through 77 pitches. So, Matt, you can't ask for much more from the two best pitchers in this rotation right now, Matthew Boyd and Shota Imanaga.
Yeah, I mean, they've been great, and it is awesome how efficient Boyd is when he's going well. That you mentioned, it was like 79 pitches in 6 innings.
Yep.
He does that a lot. You'll look up and it's the 5th inning already, and he's at like 46 pitches. Now, he might then labor a little more in the middle innings or something, but Counsell knows he can make sure he gets 18 outs out of the guy. Some nights he's going to stretch him into the 7th, and yet he's going to get him out of there before he gets to even 90 or 95 or 100 pitches. That's part of how he stayed healthy this long. I mean, we knew Matthew Boyd was a good pitcher when they signed him. The question was, can he make, even 20 or 25 starts, let alone the 30 that you'd like? Because so many times over the last several years, it's been 6 starts, 8 starts last year, I think, with Cleveland. Well, if you can get him an extra day between starts now and then, and you can keep him under like 85 pitches almost every time he touches the mound, just because he's getting outs that fast, then yeah, you can probably keep him healthier. I mean, volume isn't the only variable there, but it matters. Throwing fewer pitches means less risk of injury. And I think that's been a big part of the story. So it's just awesome. The way he attacks hitters and the confidence I think he has pitching in front of this defense. He talks about it very much in that team way too. It's cool. It works gorgeously. It is sort of reminiscent of what they found and what they got out of Imanaga last year. And now we're getting that back alongside Boyd. It took a long time. That a hamstring strain for a pitcher is usually a 3, maybe 4 week injury. And this one was 6, almost 7, but he's on the other side of 30. I mean, it makes some sense. So you're just happy to have them both back now and hope you can keep them both there for a while. I think the fact that each of them is pitch efficient and they're veterans, they know their bodies, they know their team, they know their stuff. It's all showing up, man.
Did I read correctly that Boyd has thrown more innings this year than he has any year since 2019 already?
If he's not already there, he's really close. Yeah. Like back in 18 and 19, he was like a full season, full workload starting pitcher. But ever since, it's been, obviously the pandemic ate into some of that, but then injury after injury after injury. And yeah, he's certainly going to hit a new plateau. And really, you can add up almost any 2 of his seasons from the last 5 or 6 years, and it's going to only barely catch up to what he'll probably give them this year, the way things are going.
Yeah, and we had the bullpen closing out that game with Palencia getting the save when you had in the Imanaga game. He had 2 on, ended up striking out the next 3 after hitting Wilson Contreras, of course.
What did you think about that intentional attempt to put the tying run at plate with nobody out in the 9th inning?
I
felt that was a little overblown. People get in their own heads a little bit too much, but no offense, Wilson. Nobody's trying to hit you there, buddy.
We love Wilson on this podcast. We are Wilson Contreras supporters, but
even Wilson after the game, I think more or less acknowledged he was in error for his suggestion that somehow that was intentional.
Boog did a good job of catching that. Alec Burleson standing out there at second, kind of subtly trying to tell Wilson, like, dude, calm down, please. And look, honestly, there are worse ideas. If Wilson was thinking on this level, there are worse ideas than going, Daniel Palencia has been a lot better this year because he's got his head on straight out there. He is not running too hot, and he really has learned to find some calm and throw strikes. Well, if I wanted to, I might overreact to something like that and just stay talking. Just stay at first base, yapping away, and see if I could get Palencia out of his mindset. Except I don't think that's what Wilson was doing. I think he was out of his own mindset. He was just lost. He just got a little scared and then angry, and Wilson is not good at putting any of those things away. And so it's a very Wilson Contreras confrontation, the whole thing.
So the Cubs leave St. Louis with a split, which is totally fine, which is what we anticipated. Going into Houston, confidence was not high as the Astros were white hot as the Cubs were coming in to play the Astros. They lost. They ended up losing 2 of 3 in Houston. A couple things I wanted to bring up here. A bad start from Cade Horton as we talk about the rotation. Let's unpack this a little bit. Pat, I'll start with you. Not a great outing here. So you have Cade Horton and Colin Ray both pitching in this series. This is also concerning for this part of the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the Cade Horton case, I'm less troubled than I am with some of the issues with Jameson Taillon and with the issues that Ben Brown has repeatedly demonstrated, as well as even the fact that, and we've talked about this, Colin Ray was a ticking time bomb, really. I mean, the fact that they got what they got out of him for several months when they needed to, they should count their blessings and come up with a solution to not have him be in this critical situation many more times. With Horton, as a young pitcher, this happens. You can
Young pitcher against a good team. This is a good team.
Good hitting team. Young pitcher. I've seen him work out of trouble before. I've seen him pitch much better. I look at it as a one-off. I mean, I harken back to the days when it was in maybe 87 or so when the Cubs had these two young pitchers, Jamie Moyer and Greg Maddux, and they both had ERAs in the fives, I think, and they looked pretty bad. He looks better than they do back then, so and combined they won 900 games or 800 games or something. So, I guess 600 games. But I think I would not necessarily until he starts getting repeatedly battered like this. I'm not going to be concerned about that. I'm more concerned, much like we talked about with Boyd and Shota, with how many innings he's going to pitch this year, because the problem we're going to face is if the Cubs are going to rely on him to pitch every 5 days, how late in the season is he going to be able to pitch, let alone in October? So, that's my bigger concern right now. It's not that I don't want him in the rotation. It's that I'm not sure how long he can stay in the rotation.
Yeah.
Is it a valid concern?
I think they would probably, they keep saying that they wouldn't like this, but I think secretly they would like this. And it might be something we see on the other side of the All-Star break, would be to go to a 6-man rotation for a bit. That just stretches everybody out. You're still going to have a reasonable number of off days. So you're going to have at that point, some guys just pitching once a week, which actually gives you more flexibility. Because then if Colin Ray's one of those 6 starters for at least part of that time, he can also slide out and be a long reliever if it's the other side of the rotation from him at a given point. So you're not losing that reliever as much as you're having to flex him a little more. And you're giving everyone more rest. You're avoiding, running up the innings total on Horton, on Boyd, on Imanaga, on really any of these guys that you have questions about.
You make a good point too. We're now at the end of this long stretch, this arduous stretch of consecutive games. And I think that probably has been rough on everybody. So you're right. There are more days off finally again, now that this aberration is over with, and hopefully that will help.
Yeah. And I also think Horton just ran into a really bad matchup. He's got that kind of cut ride fastball. It's a lot like Justin Steele, only right-handed. Well, that works really well for Steele because he's going to face a lot of right-handed batters, and that ball bores in on their hands and the slider plays nicely off of it. You have to do something different when you're pitching to a whole lineup of opposite-handed batters with that kind of fastball, that primary pitch. And the Astros are like crazy right-handed, one of the most right-handed lineups in history. So he ran into a tough spot of he's still learning how to use that pitch and how to play his slider off of it, whether he's going to be able to use that changeup that he's found against righties at the big league level at all. It was just not a great time for him to have to figure all that out. Like you said, at the end of this stretch where he's had to suddenly pitch every 5 days instead of every 6, which he's more used to. So I wouldn't sweat Cade Horton too much. I think he'll be fine.
That was the 5th win in a row for the Astros after that game. And the Cubs snapped that winning streak on Saturday thanks to the returning Kyle Tucker coming back to Houston, having a good series out there. In the Saturday game, he got 4 hits, including the 3-run home run, his 17th of the season. Matt, his return to Houston, the people love this guy. They love themselves some Kyle Tucker. Cubs fans also love themselves some Kyle Tucker. Seems like the kind of guy you could build a franchise around and you may want to sign.
Yeah. I mean, clearly that would be fantastic. I just don't think we're going to get very early in the spring. I think there was some legitimate cause to wonder if they could find a way to work something out, just because Tucker was coming off a year where he'd lost some time to injury. And from what I understand, he did not want to have something like that happen again and have to go into free agency with his star dimmed in a way that didn't feel fair. Now it's too late for that. So it's like we have to go through this whole season really just embracing the moment. it'll be great if they can re-sign him this winter, but they're not going to re-sign him before that. And so at this point, it's just let's watch this happen, and hopefully there are a lot more days like, well, he's really had a great last week or so after a stretch where it was more ordinary, never bad. His ceiling, his floor is so high, but you want to see that incandescent, superstardom happen. And it's been happening the last week or so. They need more weeks like that, especially if, PCA is going to continue to slide back just a little bit, and the pitching's going to put so much pressure on them to keep scoring runs.
I think the best we can hope for is a real cold streak followed by an injury that keeps him out for like 6 weeks, and then just maybe the Cubs can re-sign him this offseason. But I don't think even under those circumstances he'll make a difference. But I do like watching him play now, and if anything, it just reminds me how much the Cubs need to ensure that they strengthen their overall roster now for this stretch run, because this is the year.
So let's talk about that for a second. What do the Cubs need to do now? What are their biggest needs? They've got there's a lot. We ran down the laundry list last week of things that they need to do.
Yeah, fortunately, when you have several things you need to do, you can do some of them and you get better, and you can do all of them and you get really good. Some of the things they need to do aren't going to be very, I think, costly, frankly. I think getting a bench bat that you can rely on is something they absolutely need to do. And I think they can probably do it by acquiring a veteran, maybe somebody who's being paid a little bit more than they're currently worth. So who cares, right? But would be of value to the Cubs and better than what they have at the back of the lineup. I mean, I think from an offensive standpoint, that seems to be the one thing that they're lacking right now. I mean, we can quibble about third base, et cetera, and can talk about, I'd be curious to see Matt's take on Cam Smith, whether he's a third baseman or not aside, but just in terms of his offense right now. But the extra bat could potentially come from internal sources, although that's tricky because bringing up a young guy who's not going to play every day has its ups and downside, or it could come, I think, very easily through a trade. But just looking at the offensive side, I was curious what Matt's thoughts were on what the Cubs can do realistically and what they should do realistically to strengthen their offense.
Yeah, I think their top priority has to be a starter, which I'm sure we can talk about more in a minute. But the problem is, to me, this team has 3 distinct and fairly important needs, which are starter, reliever, and some kind of upgrade to that position player mix. Whether that's,
I was thinking we'd start with the easiest one first, Matt.
Yeah. Well, but this is the problem, right? Is that might, in theory, be the easiest one. Although it's always easier to upgrade your pitching, because what you do is take the pitcher that you acquire, put them wherever they normally go in your pitching staff, and take the worst pitcher off your roster. You can't automatically do that with a position player that you acquire, because they've got to have a certain fit. Positionally, they're limiting factors in you've got to have a bench that's prepared for injuries. You've got to have a backup catcher. You've got to have a backup shortstop. You've got to theoretically have a backup center fielder, although the Cubs have managed not to all year so far.
They don't let PCA take a day off, so that helps.
Yeah, that's the key to that one. I think it should be relatively easy to upgrade this bench, because Vidal Brujan and John Birdie are such a low floor right now. They've been massively disappointing, especially Birdie, who I think they had every right to expect would be better than this, but he's 35, and sometimes it just happens. It's all gone for him. His stuff is just gone. And so you're going to have to push one of them off the roster and go acquire someone else. Here's the problem. It's not that deep a farm system, the Cubs is, and it hasn't been trending that well this year. There aren't guys putting on a show that teams are going to be eager to snatch up in trades. So if you're the top priority is upgrading the pitching staff, you might run out of money to buy things with, where the money is prospects here. You might run out of money before you get to what should be the easiest and cheapest little upgrade, which is to the positional side. That's my worry, is that this team has too many needs for what is a relatively limited sort of budget for expenditure, not
How
financially.
hard would it be, though? How hard would it be to spend $5 or $7 million or some prorated version of that on a guy who some other team who's bad and cheap doesn't want to pay $7 million or even half of the remaining $7 million to, because they're not going anywhere? I don't even think the return from a trade value is necessarily what I'm most concerned about. I think that could be the cheap side. It's just taking on extra money, getting a player who's not worth $7 million, but might be worth, $3 million. And for our purposes might be just exactly what they do need for, a limited role on the team.
I think the Cubs had, so this is a little bit of reporting, what I've been able to soak up. I think they have about $15 million they can add at this deadline if they need to. $15 million added to the payroll. Now that's
a $30 million worth of players, basically, if you say you're only paying for the second half.
Exactly. So let's say you want to just make, 3.5 or 4 million of that be just, like you said, to sort of soak up in money and not have to pay out as much in talent to get a guy like Willie Castro from the Twins, who is going to be a name all over the trade market. The Twins are floundering. Castro's a free agent at the end of the year. He's versatile offensively and defensively. He'd be great. The problem is guys like that are going to have enough of a trade market that you might get bid up anyway. So you got to find just the right person there. And because those guys will have that bit of a market, they're not going to go early. You could trade for a starting pitcher right now, and we've heard reports, and I can confirm those reports that the Cubs are trying to do something basically now, soon, on the starting pitching front. It's much less realistic to get something done on the positional side early, which might mean just longer for teams to hang around, and either a target that you had on your radar falls off because that team's in contention now, or two other bidders come into the mix, and now the prospect you'd have to give up to get that guy, even though you're soaking up his $4 million in remaining salary or whatever, is more than you're comfortable doing, given that you also have to check the boxes of improving your rotation and your bullpen.
I mean, there's got to be, at the end of the year, there's got to be a Randall Simon or a Luis Salazar. So, I mean, come on, there's going to be somebody out there. But and the longer you go, the cheaper they get, too, because, you're paying less. If you're waiting until the end of July, that's different than, that would be my selling point to a team. I'm like, look, you're cheap. You're super cheap. There are teams that are super cheap, right? Mm-hmm. We'll pay half, we'll pay for all of July, August, September. We'll even throw in $150,000 in U.S. currency in exchange, for this guy. Give us to him now, and we'll give you a Class A pitcher that has some potential down the road. There's got to be somebody on some of these bad teams. I mean, the Marlins or somebody have to be like, maybe they can give us one of our ex-players back. Who knows? But then alternatively, you wait till the end of July, and then certainly at the trade deadline, there'll be more teams out of it probably at that point. It'll be cheaper for you financially at that point. And, when the music stops, they're going to be, we've been in this position, right? As Cubs fans, we're like, okay, let's just get rid of X, Y, and Z. It's the end of we're not going anywhere, like here's Chris Coughlin, take him, or whoever, right? Like,
David DeJesus. Remember they gave him
I was just
away
about to say David DeJesus.
Yeah. I do think that kind of thing will probably be possible. I would keep an eye on someone like Ahmed Rosario from the Nationals. He'd be a great fit. He really replaces Brujan nicely. He can play a competent third, fill in for Shaw, gives you a little bit of slashing offense, what you hoped Brujan would bring, and he hasn't. There are going to be guys like that. It's just, I don't know, man.
Get him, I guess, right?
The volatility on guys like that is so huge. You thought that's the kind of player that you were bringing in with Jeimer Candelario 2 years ago. Look how that panned out. So,
well, better than it's panned out for him this year.
Yeah, well, that's fair. That's
at least with the Cubs, he had that good first week, right?
Yeah.
Well, then there's the hard part, Jeremy. Yeah.
Looking at starting pitching is, as we mentioned, something that the Cubs need to do to lock down this rotation. It also helps your bullpen by hopefully shuffling some folks in there that can help as well. So, and out of the rotation.
Are the Cubs going to get all the Kellers? Yes or no?
Is Arizona where they're going shopping? Is that where you're feeling
or is
they're going to add a pitcher?
I think, if I had to rank the guys that I think they're most likely to acquire right now, it's probably like the top three is probably Seth Lugo, Mitch Keller, and Michael Soroka of the Nationals. Obviously, they have looked into and will look into higher upside guys than those. If those don't thrill people, then sorry. But those are nice, realistic targets that they're definitely in on. And
how
those
much better are they than Colin Ray? I guess that's what people want to know.
Clearly, all three of them clearly better than Colin Ray. Either in, Lugo's going to give you much more durability, like he can work deeper into games than Ray because he's got like 10 different pitches. He's got pitches I don't even know the names of. Or Keller's he's a little less consistent, but he's more capable of giving you 6 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts kind of stuff, even against a decent lineup when he's right. And I'm sure they believe that they're better at pitching development than the Pirates, and they might be right. Soroka is a wild card because a lot of injury issues the last couple of years, but this year the stuff looks pretty darn good. So those are just a few names. There's a long list of guys that they're going to check in on that they've already checked in on. Like you mentioned, Merrill Kelly, Zach Gallen. I mean, those are possibilities. I would say, while you're right that like that's the harder thing, that's the more expensive thing is the real thing to say.
Sure.
You're right. You're going to have to give up something that hurts to get one of these guys. I think they're pretty locked in and like just they know they're going to have to do that. They've known since Justin Steele went down that was going to happen, and they have that plan and they're ready to pay that price.
I hope so. I hope they haven't been just like, this is fine.
Right. And there are so many of these guys, not that all of them will move, but I think there are enough of them out there. And the Cubs might be the most motivated buyers in the league. I'm not sure that, we can talk about exactly how true that should be or in what way Jed Hoyer should be looking to buy. But I think they're pretty darn motivated. I think they do have the currency to go get a guy like that. It's just, can you either do one-stop shopping, like getting Keller and David Bednar from the Pirates or something like that? Can you do that? Or can you get a guy who's kind of a bargain? Maybe you're rolling the dice a little more, like a Soroka, so that you keep more powder dry to upgrade, like we talked about, the position players in the bullpen. But it's a balancing act. It's also, you got to kind of be patient because sellers don't necessarily want to sell real early. The Cubs used to when they were rebuilding, but teams now are reluctant to sell too soon. They want to see if the price will spike as more guys get hurt throughout July or something.
Cubs got Aramis Ramirez and Kenny Lofton pretty early. They got what's his face?
Rich Harden,
Carlos Quinton,
Addison
Russell, the pitcher from the White Sox, Quintana. They got him before the All-Star break. Yeah. Addison Russell was an All-Star break deal for the Smarja deal. I mean, that was although he wasn't really coming up. I guess.
That was 4th of July.
It was literally on 4th of July. I think fireworks are going off at Wrigley, and my phone's also going off. I mean, I think the Cubs have to get a starting pitcher. the question is, what would really be unfortunate is, especially after all the chips they put in on Kyle Tucker, if they went out and also got a starting pitcher and then like Boyd's arm fell off, and it's like, well, now we're back to square one, right? Like in the playoffs, you've got Tyon and God knows who else giving up bombs left and right to the Dodgers. I can see it already in my head. Like they need a third starter, but they need a starter who they can pitch in a playoff game. They don't necessarily have that. And that to me is the concern. And then, along those lines, I mean, I'm glad that PCA and Horton are up and that they're, playing. But, as far as this great farm system that has been touted for many years now, it seems like whenever somebody gets to AAA and they stay there for a year, they just kind of fall off the face of the earth. So, like, I mean, they've got 3 or 4 guys, maybe 5 guys in position players in the minors right now who are at a high enough level that we're supposed to be expecting them to provide some help either this year or next year. And they may have to trade some of them, but let's hope they trade the right ones. I mean, we just watched them trade Cam Smith, and he seems to be hitting quite well lately for Houston. We hear a lot about Ballesteros. We hear a lot about Contra and Cassie and, a couple of the younger shortstops, I guess. But, are they going to trade so much out of their farm system that they won't have anything left? Because it doesn't seem like they have. It doesn't seem like they have like 24 guys down there these days. Who you can say, oh yeah, look at our farm system. It seems to have thinned out kind of quickly. I don't know. Is that my imagination?
Not at all. That's what I'm saying. My worry about this team is not that they don't understand their needs or that they won't be aggressive about filling them. It's that they've got multiple needs and maybe not the firepower in the farm system to fill those needs, at least without totally bankrupting that farm system. Because it is, Alcantara, Casey, Ballesteros, Jefferson Rojas. Jackson Wiggins has been a really nice helium story on the pitching side this year. That's kind of it. I'm not saying that's it, like there are no other interesting prospects. There are a dozen other interesting prospects. There is not a depth of guys that I trust to be imminent contributors in the majors. Now, that's not completely a knock because they spent a bunch of capital to get Kyle Tucker, in sort of a 2-phase maneuver, trading Christopher Morel and Hunter Biggie to get Paredes, packaging him with Smith. They also, trading Jackson Ferris and Zaire Hope, who are both good prospects, got them Michael Busch. They have this young core of players, Busch and PCA and even Miguel Amaya and Horton and Matt Shaw. I mean, that's to their credit. The problem is you've promoted all those guys. Some of them, Shaw's obviously falling a little short of what you might have hoped. And now the shelves are a little empty. And part of that is because, stop me if this is sounding familiar, good organizations get first-round picks right. Whether that's 2 years later you look up in the guys in the majors and playing decently, or you were able to trade them for a guy who's now in the majors for you and playing really well, like they did with Smith and Ferris. Really good organizations, the great organizations, the ones who win for several years at a time, they're also developing 4th and 11th round picks and $80,000 signees out of the Dominican Republic into high quality prospects and eventually into good major leaguers or high caliber trade chips. I think we really, really, really hoped that after that didn't happen under Theo Epstein, there was a rededication to having that happen consistently under Jed Hoyer. And so far it's not happening, which is not to say that it can't or won't. And we have seen some signs of it happening. And there's been some bad breaks this year, like Brandon Birdsell missing the whole season so far with a shoulder thing. But we've got to more consistently see this team be able to develop players, because Cam Smith, they didn't make a scouting mistake by trading Cam Smith instead of Matt Shaw. The Astros are better at developing players like Cam Smith than the Cubs are, which is why
it did take them 6 weeks to develop.
I am shocked that it didn't take longer. I am shocked that this has worked as well as it has for them. So part of that is maybe bad luck, or you just have to give Cam Smith a ton of credit. That's awesome makeup on his part to face down that challenge, right?
Well, what
But
I
also,
would say, though,
what did you say?
To your overall point, though, Matt, one of the things that good teams have a knack of doing is trading the right players. They trade the players who aren't going to be hits. They trade the guys who become busts or become less than what they'd hoped for. And the Cubs seem to trade guys who all do pretty well when they do trade them, and they keep the guys who oftentimes just kind of disappear, over time into the woodwork.
And either way, that is a problem. I think that it's not so much that they're trading the wrong guys as that they're not as good as they need to be at coaching and developing guys. That some of these guys had that talent all along, but the Cubs were never going to bring it out of them. Or the guys that they keep, they're never going to bring, like they might trade Owen Casey at this deadline, and he does tone down the strikeouts and hit 40 home runs for someone in 2 years. I'm not saying that will happen. I don't believe a whole lot in Owen Casey, but I'm saying it makes me nervous when I see that, because I think it's the Cubs having a slight shortfall in that player development aspect that really defines how good you are as a franchise. It can't just be about hitting on first round picks, making savvy trades, or even spending, although the Cubs have to spend a lot more than they do. We've talked about that till we were blue in the face. But they're also I'm not sure they're developing well enough. Because if they were, some of the problems they're facing right this moment, they wouldn't be facing. They would love to not be shopping for a position player, because a month and a half ago, they called up James Triantos. And even though he's just a roving backup all across the infield and in left field and stuff, he's contributing. That should be what happened if they were the caliber of organization that they aspire to be, I think.
What scares me is that you're not sold on Owen Cassie, and he's currently the number 2 ranked prospect in the Cubs' entire organization.
Yeah.
Which gets to the issue that we discussed a long time ago about how the Cubs had a lot of depth, but not a lot of high impact prospects. And PCA and Horton were kind of the 2 highest end, I think. And that was even before the Cam Smith situation. And now we're seeing a lot of depth guys, and depth guys tend to be mid, right? Because that's what they are. I mean, hopefully somebody will break out, but the Jordan Wicks, I was really hoping he would come through this year and give them something. That would have been, they could have really used that, instead of the Brown Ray thing. So it's going to be the next couple of weeks, I think, will help define, Jed's tenure, right? I mean, we traded the core. We didn't replace them with veteran free agents like the Freddie Freemans and Robbie Rays of the world. Instead, we went into a painful rebuild, and the guys we got for them and the guys we got for being bad all these last several years are now here, or almost here. It's been 4 years, like soon to be here, better be here. And now we need it to amount to something. And if it ends up being a first round exit and then the loss of Kyle Tucker, and then another rebuild, I think fans are going to probably be like, wait,
that will end this podcast. That will end this podcast.
They're going to be, that's not enough, right? I mean, it's got to be more than that, right? So, and I think Jed knows that. So we'll see how bold he is and how astute he is at making the right deals.
It really just underscores they're more all in on this season than I think they meant to be. Don't you guys?
At this point, they kind of, I mean, given how everything's played out, they've sort of tied their hands, I guess, right?
With 2 weeks left until the All-Star break, this week the Cubs return home. They are playing 3 games against Cleveland, 3 games against St. Louis. Looking at the probables for the Cleveland series, Gavin Williams for the Guardians against Matthew Boyd on the Tuesday game. The Wednesday game, Tanner Beebe, Shota Imanaga, and then Luis Ortiz and Cade Horton are your probables. Let's get some quick predictions. Pat, we'll start with you. 6 games this week.
Well, Cleveland just got what they were just swept by an NL Central foe.
And we have the power. We can control this, so we should aim high.
And so
Keep
here we
this
are.
in mind.
Yeah. I guess the thing that I'm most bullish about this week is that they don't. I mean, they face a couple decent starters, but they don't face the onslaught of good starting pitching that it feels like they've been dealing with for the last month or so, a couple weeks. So, I mean, I look at this as a 4-2 week, especially with Boyd pitching twice, Ibanaga back in the rotation. I think Cleveland will be a good matchup for Horton, hopefully, knock on wood. And then they've got the Ray tie on, but at least they go back to back. So, odds are maybe something decent will happen offensively in one of those 2 games. And the Cubs go 4-2.
4-2. Matt, are you more bullish? Are you feeling 5-1?
I don't want to go that far. I don't want to abuse our power, guys.
Okay, that's what we get.
Yeah, I'll stick with 4-2. I think they should be able to. It may take the form of sweeping one and losing the other. On balance, I would expect them to win 2 out of 3 in each of these because I think both Cleveland and St. Louis are true talent, kind of like 500-ish teams. And if you're a good team hosting 2 500 teams at your home park, you should win those series more often than not. And Cubs aren't playing awesome, but they're also not playing dreadfully bad.
No.
Last week, 3-4 on the road against a couple of fairly tough teams. That's an acceptable outcome. So we have to keep in mind that while it hasn't felt great for the last couple of weeks, they've kept their heads above water. And now I think they'll make some progress again this week.
Yeah, they're 5-7 over the last 2 weeks. If they go 4-2 this week, that'll make them 9-9 for the stretch.
So we'll make it unanimous 4-2 week, and we are going to close out the show as we do every single
Could I just do one thing before we close out? I forgot to put this on the outline. Sorry, real quick. I just wanted to do a shout out to the Cobra, Dave Parker, one of my favorite childhood players of all time, who just passed away. He had been elected to the Hall of Fame, or selected for the Hall of Fame, although he's a month away from the actual induction, which, at least unlike Ron Santo, the Veterans Committee didn't completely screw him over, and that he knew about it before the end, but they waited far too long, and sadly he won't be there to actually be inducted in person. He was, I was born after Roberto Clemente tragically passed away, so I don't have any notions of him other than the picture of him and Ernie on the wall behind me and what I've seen in some videos. But Dave Parker, as a child, when I was a child, was one of the most fearsome hitters in baseball, and was had the best arm in right field. We used to watch on Saturday mornings. They had that This Week in Baseball, and they do the Diamond Gems, and there'd be and I remember in the All-Star game watching him throw a ball from deep right field to home plate on the fly to get a big out, and he just had a cannon of an arm. He won the MVP, finished second, finished third a couple times. He's a top 10 MVP guy a lot, and I remember that 1979 We Are Family with Willie Stargell and Candyman John Candelaria and Kent DeColve and Bill Mad Dog Madlock and Phil Scrap Iron Garner and all these guys. It was just a really fun team to watch, and he was the heart and soul of that team. And so I will always miss Dave Parker, one of my favorites of all time.
And now we will close the show as we do every single week, where we profile a Cubs player from the past. Matt, you are on the clock to think of a player for us to profile next week. I've put the names of the ones we've already done here in the chat, so you know who's taken. And you think about that while, Pat, you tell us about your boyhood favorite. Tell us about Bill Buckner.
The late, great Bill Buckner, my absolute favorite. Born in 1949 in Vallejo, California. Bill Buckner was an A student at school. He was also a 2-time All-American wide receiver in high school. and hit his junior and senior year in high school 657 and 529. Pretty good batter. He was drafted in the second round of the 1968 amateur draft by the Los Angeles Dodgers. To Matt's point earlier about how good teams can find players in the draft, I will tell you who the Dodgers were able to find in 1968 in the draft. They found one Bill Buckner. They found a guy named Bobby Valentine. They found a guy named Davey Lopes, Tom Pachork, Steve Garvey, Ron Say, and Doyle Alexander.
Jesus.
I have now labeled this the draft that defined Dodgers for a decade. It's my alliterative effort. That would be the title of the article I would write about the players they picked up that year. Can you imagine? I mean, seven future legit major league players, including 3/4 of their infield for the next 10 years, and Bill Buckner, who brought them. Well, we'll talk about that later. A good return in rookie league that year. For the league, for the entire league, the top 3 hitters were Tom Pachork, Bill Buckner, Steve Garvey. So, they were right off the bat quite good. In the minors that year, Ted Williams watched Bill Buckner and correctly predicted Buckner would win a batting title someday. He's like, that guy's going to win a batting title. He's good. He's a good hitter. And they were, of course, correct. Ted Williams was correct. Bill Buckner's coach, by the way, his first coach was none other than Tommy Lasorda back when he was in like low A ball or whatever. So that would also be his manager in the majors. In 1970, Bill Buckner broke his jaw after a collision with Davey Lopes. They told him he'd missed 5 weeks. He missed 1 game and played for the next 5 weeks with his jaw wired shut. There's a reason why they called him a gamer, by the way. In 1971, he was a Topps Rookie All-Star. Here's his baseball card. See, that's a Topps Rookie All-Star baseball card right there. In 1972, he hit 319. There he was in 1972 with his baseball card, hitting 319. In 1973, there's his card from 73. He was almost in Godfather 2. They actually had planned to have him and I think Pachork and a couple other guys in the movie, and they cut off their facial hair and they got all ready for the show, but their scene got cut, so they weren't in the show, sadly. In 1974, here he is. He hit 314, stole 31 bases. It's very, very fleet of foot at the time. Finished 25th in the MVP voting, just to show you what the league thought of him at the time. They voted him 25th for most valuable player. Sadly, in 1975, he got a severely sprained ankle, and it never healed properly. And he, from then on, was hobbled and had to like tape up his ankle and ice it every game. And it was a miracle that he was able to play anymore. In 1976, here's his 1976 card, still with the Dodgers. He hit 301 with 28 stolen bases. So despite the ankle injury, he still stole 28 bases that year. And then after the season, he had to have surgery on the ankle. But then on the day that will live in infamy, 1/11/77, he was traded along with Ivan De Jesus for Rick Monday and Mike Garman to none other than your Chicago Cubs, where he then became a mainstay for the next 8 years as a Cub. In 1977, here he is in 1977, and seeing his Cubs uniform finally. He started the season on the disabled list because he was still recovering from that ankle injury. But he did end up coming in and playing pretty well. Herman Frank said the guy can only play at 50%, and he's still amazing. I wanted to read you a quick quote from that I thought was sort of encapsulates a lot of Bill Buckner. It has to do with that 77 season. Jeff Pearlman, who wrote The Bad Guys Won, the book, he has a quote about Bill Buckner. He said, in Vero Beach, Florida, home of the Dodgers spring training, Lasorda was raving over Rick Monday, who was roping balls left and right. This is after the trade for Buckner. Lord knows Bill Buckner was not going to be made a fool of by his replacement. He only played 122 games with the Cubs in 1977, a feat that deserves to be immortalized in the Courage Hall of Fame. He hit 284 and drove in 60 runs and stole 7 bases with a pronounced limp that only got worse as the summer turned to fall. In late August, the Dodgers went to Wrigley Field for a series that meant little to the floundering Cubs and everything to Buckner. In the first game, a 6-2 Chicago triumph, Buckner drove in 5 runs with 2 homers and a pair of singles. The next day, he had 3 more hits and a home run. And Herman Franks was quoted as saying, "Buckner is pretty tough on his daddy," referencing Lasorda. That's one feisty SOB. That's sort of the gritty Bill Buckner that I came to know and appreciate as a kid. Buckner then went 14 for 28 the next week and won National League Player of the Week. You got to remember, back in this time, the Cubs were pretty bad, and Buckner and basically Bruce Sutter and at times maybe a Rick Russell or a Dave Kingman were around and were sort of the only real thing to be hopeful for. So the way Bill Buckner played was definitely something that, as also a first baseman who didn't like to strike out and made a lot of contact, had a bad ankle. I always looked up to as sort of somebody to idolize. In 1978, here he is in 1978, he hit 323, finished 17th in the MVP. And after the season, he stayed in Chicago and basically free of charge, I think, went around and did all these public appearances for the Cubs. PK Wrigley or whatever was extremely excited to have Buckner around and had some glowing comments about what a player or what a team guy he was, because he went around and did a lot of public appearances when everybody else had fled to wherever they go in the wintertime. He also he got the prestigious Chicago Baseball Writers Player of the Year award that year. It's hard to get that. In 1979, wearing the powder blue pinstripe uniform that has become synonymous with the Cubs of that era, he hit, let's see, in fact, I have my Chicago Cubs Bill Buckner jersey, by the way, which is also a replica from none other than Cooperstown, where it's in the Hall of Fame, as he should be. I'm wearing the hat with it. Bill Buckner, many remember from the May 17th game against the Phillies, the 23-22 game. Most people remember it as the Schmidt versus Kingman home run-a-thon. But what they don't remember often, because this is what happened to Buckner much of his career, he had 4 hits in that game, including 7 runs batted in and a grand slam. I mean, the guy drove in 7 runs in a game, and it's never mentioned as part of the recap of what happened in that game. So we move on to 1980. This was a big year for Bill Buckner in 1980. Here's his card from 1980. He hit 324 and won the batting title. I remember, because I remember listening to that last day, my grandmother's kitchen on the transistor radio with one of the earpieces in my ear. They had asked, the manager had asked him if he wanted to sit out the game because Keith Hernandez was on his, was trailing him and didn't want to lose the batting title to Hernandez and make Ted Williams look like a sucker and a fool. And Buckner said, "No, I'm going to play." And he did play. And he held on to win the title, finished 14th in the MVP, and also won again for the second time the Chicago Writers Player of the Year award, which is unheard of to win it twice in 3 years. 1981, here he is. 1981 was the first of the strike years that I remember as a kid. It was in the middle of the season, which was kind of weird. They wiped out like 2 months of the season. And yet, despite all that, Bill Buckner led the league with 35 doubles. On a prorated basis, he would have had over 50, of course. He hit 311 and made his one and only All-Star team of his career, which is actually incredible.
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
Finished 10th in the MVP voting again. And then we move on to 1982. Here he is in 1982 with the new Cubs uniform. He hit 306, hit 201 hits. I don't think anybody did 200 hits. I think Sandberg did it once and maybe Juan Pierre or whatever, but 200 hits is a lot. Finished 10th in the MVP yet again, I might add, with his 34 doubles and 105 RBIs. Also led the National League in singles. Good for him. In 1983, here he is in 1983, he hit 38 doubles, which also led the league. I mean, what an amazing performance. But then in 1984, we ran into some trouble because the Cubs had made this trade for Leon Durham. They traded Bruce Sutter away, who was very popular and good, obviously, closer. And they really wanted Durham had played a lot of left field in 83, but they wanted to move him to first base. So Buckner was that was the year, as we've talked about extensively last year's podcast. They had Gary Matthews now in left field, and they had Junior in center, and they had Moreland / Mel Holland, right? So it was getting crowded on the team. They had no DH at the time. So Buckner was sitting a lot, which was obviously not, to his liking. And it was kind of an awkward, frustrating situation. And on May 25th, sadly, the Cubs traded Buckner to the Boston Red Sox for future Hall of Famer Dennis Eckersley, who was somewhat mid with the Cubs in his career. He was no Bill Buckner. In 1985, hate to show this ugly picture, but here he is in a Red Sox uniform. He hit the Red Sox 46 doubles and 110 RBIs. He also had 201 hits that year, his second 200 hit season of his career, which broke the Red Sox franchise record for hits in a year, breaking the record that Jimmy Fox had set in 1936. Buckner also set a major league record that year for most assists by a first baseman with 184. What a great glove man he was. 184 assists in first base that year. Which brings us to 1986. Here he is in 1986 with the Red Sox. Looks a lot like he did in 1985. Actually, quite a bit like he did in 1985, really. And he had another great year. He had 18 home runs and 102 RBIs. Basically carried the team to the playoffs on his back, despite having to announce in July that he would need postseason surgery to address painful bone spurs. This is something that most people would have just tapped out mid-season. He's like, no, I'm going to wait till after the season to do it. So he's kind of limping around for the rest of the year. He led the team to the playoffs, got him to the World Series. And now we get to, and I want to get into this in a little bit of detail, Game 6 of the World Series in 1986, because there's a lot of misinformation and misnomers about that. There's a perception out there that Bill Buckner somehow had something to do with the Red Sox losing the World Series. And yeah, I feel like that's not really true. So let's talk about what actually happened. So in Game 6 of the World Series, the Red Sox were in the 10th inning, had taken a 2-run lead, 5-3. They were still at bat, man on second. Bill Buckner induced a hit by pitch. He goes to first, so it's now first and second with 2 outs. Now he did this and took the physical pain of that hit by pitch because future Hall of Famer Jim Rice was behind him in the batting order coming up to plate. All Rice had to do was get a base hit to drive an insurance run, and the Red Sox win the World Series. Unfortunately, Rice flew out and has become the GOAT that we all think of Jim Rice as being for basically blowing the World Series of 1986. I don't think Jim Rice deserves that much criticism, but apparently that's synonymous with what happened in that World Series.
Synonymous.
In the bottom of the 10th, by the way, future Cub Calvin Schiraldi, who would later become a Cub, because the Cubs would then trade their next closer, Lee Smith, for Al Nipper and Calvin Schiraldi, which was a disaster. Calvin Schiraldi came in, recorded 2 outs, bottom of the 10th, up 5-3. Who's the GOAT now, right? And then proceeds to give up 3 consecutive singles and a wild pitch to tie the game up at 5. Calvin Schiraldi's the GOAT. Mookie Wilson hit a ground ball. The first baseman, suffering from terrible bone spurs, which were supposed to end his season in July, was not able to corral the ball, which is too bad because up until that time, Bill Buckner 131 consecutive chances without an error in the playoffs. He was a playoff Gold Glove guy, right? He'd never made an error in the playoffs until that play. In fact, he'd only made 1 error in the previous 52 games he'd played. And a run scored, and they went to a Game 7. It's a little Bartman-esque in that regard, right? Like, don't forget there's a Game 7. So what happens in Game 7 in a tie game? Calvin Schiraldi pitches 1/3 of an inning, gives up 3 earned runs, and loses the game. So Calvin Schiraldi has always been thought of as the GOAT of the 1986 World Series, and the reason why the Mets won. So between Rice and Schiraldi, I feel bad, for both of them. But clearly Bill Buckner was not to blame for what happened. Anyway, here's Bill Buckner the following season, still with the Red Sox, and then he goes to the Angels, and somewhere I have his Kansas City card, but I won't get into that. He played for California and Kansas City later in his career for a short time. For his career, he had 2,715 hits, but for the strike year, that probably would have been closer to 2,800 hits. He had 498 doubles, 450 walks, and 453 strikeouts. 3 more strikeouts than walks, and 45 more doubles than strikeouts. Now, I defy you to find any baseball player today who could have more doubles than strikeouts in a season, let alone in a career. That's pretty amazing, I think. 289 batting average. As a Cub, he had 1,136 hits, 516 RBIs, 187 walks, and only 159 Ks with a 300 average. Pretty good. Finished top 10 in batting 6 times in the league. And then the last two side notes I'll give you. In the 2012 and 2013 seasons, Bill Buckner was the coach of the Cubs Boise Hawks team in Idaho. He had gone to retire. And then the second note that I think I should tell you about, did you know that Bill Buckner once caught a baby falling from a burning building in 2011 in an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm? So, Bill Buckner, hero, saver of children, batting champ, 2-time doubles champ, singles champ, major league record setter for assists by a first baseman in a season, franchise record holder for the in hits for the Boston Red Sox, multiple top 10 MVP candidate, and an all-around hero and great player who I will forever think of as my favorite Cub player. Going through an entire period when the Cubs never made the playoffs, it was always nice to have somebody who you could root for, who gave their all, and was basically the true reflection of what a gritty champ would be like. I only wish that he'd been able to play for a better Cubs team, but they chose not to be better. So that's the story of Bill Buckner. That is the unvarnished, truthful, ripping back the Band-Aid story with all its warts and everything. That's what happened.
Well, that is a tremendous piece of work. Thank you, Pat, for putting that together. I loved seeing the baseball cards through the years, the jersey as well. If you're listening on the audio platform and you missed all that, you can quickly go over to our YouTube channel, youtube.com, search for the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. There you can see all the memorabilia that Pat was showing off to us.
I once bought several of his cards from the 1980 season. Here they are. I don't know why. I bought 16 cards from that season. I also have all of his Fleer and Donruss cards, but I figured nobody wants to see those, so I want to go straight with the Topps cards because I figured those had more cachet. But needless to say, I have numerous Bill Buckner autographs. My one regret, actually, is that early on in our podcast, when he was coaching at Boise, I think it was our first year, I wanted to have him on the podcast. And honestly, I was too timid to ask him to be on a brand new podcast. I figured he probably didn't know what a podcast was. I mean, that was back before Serial, back when we were doing this kind of as an avant-garde medium. And I wish I had, because I would have loved to have a conversation with him on the podcast. And I'll always sort of regret that. But I will not regret the countless hundreds of hours I spent watching him play baseball.
Matt, now it's on to you to follow up Bill Buckner. Who is our Cubs player profile for next week?
I have one clarifying question to ask. And obviously I've done this a few times already, so I could have asked it before. But I want to know whether you guys are comfortable going back to players that you have no living memory of, or if we're more, the vibe here is more people of whom, you guys have actual memories to share and kick around as you're doing these.
I have personal memories of Cubs from before I was born, so feel free to give me anybody. My dad's told me enough stories, and I've read enough books that I feel like I know all these guys.
All right. Yeah, so nothing is off limits here. We want to learn. Part of doing this is we get to not only reminisce, but we also get to learn, and we get to go back.
Then I think it's time to talk more about one of the Cubs of yore who has gotten the least love relative to how good and interesting a player they were. And that is Stan Hack.
Stan Hack, yes.
MVP.
Taking it way, way back with Stan Hack.
Excellent.
I'll have to ask my dad for some Stan Hack stories.
Yeah.
Perfect. This is great. And awesome stuff. Loved hearing about Bill Buckner and loved talking about all things Cubs this week. Matt, please remind our listeners where they can find your work on the internet and how they can follow you on social media platforms.
Social media is simple. I'm scaling back on everything else. It's just at matrueblood.bsky.social on Blue Sky. And mostly, please check us out at northsidebaseball.com. We got a lot of stuff really loading up for the month of July. Probably when the Twins come out here when the Cubs come out here to the Twin Cities where I live, I will be at those games, covering those each day next week. So keep an eye out for that stuff, for our trade deadline content. We got really good draft coverage that's sort of cross-platform from the other sites that I work with and run. So please check us out there. We're going to be doing great stuff all season.
Awesome work. As always, highly recommend you check that out. And when you're doing that, make sure that you're checking our YouTube channel, like I mentioned. You're following us on the social media platforms as well, at Wrigleyville Nat. And make sure that if your podcatcher of choice is Spotify, you can also get the video version of the podcast there as well. So make sure you're subscribed everywhere across the board. Tell your Cub fan friends about the podcast. That's how we continue to spread the word. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.